two reasons. One, I wasn't feeling a heart-inspired message coming from anywhere else, and I was needing it. And I had actually reached out to Gary and asked him to start something like this, and he said no. And I said, okay, fine, I'll just do it. And I'm so glad I did, because for me, in getting through these last 2 months, it's been critical. And
mindset is everything.
Well, and I forget, so many of the leaders that I grew up under in the company don't have a real prominent place anymore. And so for some old timers, to see Mark Willis or to hear Diana, I mean, it's meant a lot, I think, to quite a few people. So.
Right.
So how is it in New Jersey?
I'm in Virginia, so I'm originally from New Jersey.
Okay.
I'm in Virginia. Jersey's my hometown.
Okay.
We are, I'm Northern Virginia, outside of DC, and Virginia is supposed to open up later this week, like phase 1, but Northern Virginia won't. Our cases are so much higher up here compared to the rest of the state that they don't want to. So there's a lot of discord, a lot of, the people who want it to be open and the people who don't, and they're all very vocal about it. It's a little interesting.
It's a little crazy.
Yeah. I'm not 100% ready for the world to open back up again.
Well, considering what you
because
I can imagine.
I know. I like the slower pace, though. I like having my son with me all the time. I like, I have found that I needed to slow down. So
I read your post.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I read your post from this morning, and I thought, let's make sure we keep some of this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of my entrepreneurial small business friends are all go, 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 go. And I'm like, no. A healthy dose of go. It's I'm very quiet about it, though. I don't share that that was the first time I publicly said, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah. Well, hopefully as places do start to release some of the restrictions, we don't see big outbreaks. That would be the worst, because then I think we'll clamp down.
And it'll be worse. And then the fear, there's a lot of people. I only had 2 moments of bad fear through the whole thing. Like, they were short, but they were, if I stayed there, it would have been ugly. Yeah. And I could just, bring myself back to everything's going to be okay.
So your shirt says "Rockin' the Realtor Life."
Yep, in my sweats and no makeup. This is
no
my
makeup.
uniform.
I'm impressed.
No makeup. No nails. I got nothing. No nails, no makeup. I don't do my hair, nothing. This is me.
Good for you. You look phenomenal. If that's how you get out of bed in the morning, God bless you.
Well, out of the shower, my hair's wet, but yeah.
All right. Well, it is 9 o'clock our time, straight up. And as usual, we're about 17. We'll get more people jumping on. So if you would, just start with your KW story. I've been following you for years on social media.
Story too. So I joined KW. I was a realtor for about 10 years when I joined KW. I loved it. I went head over heels into everything. I drank more Kool-Aid than anyone else. My team experienced the most growth. I loved it. And I had imposter syndrome really bad, if is the way I could say it. I didn't feel I deserved any of the accolades. Like, I didn't feel like I deserved any of the awards. I was given a TED Talk at the time. I was the regional cultural ambassador. I'm doing all these big things, but I didn't feel like I deserved it. And I had a lot of discord going on personally. I was in a very rocky marriage, and I thought, and I had a long-standing team member who didn't like KW, and I just I put my hands in the air and I left. I was trying to keep the team happy. I knew my marriage, my husband at the time had other plans than fidelity. So that's a little hard to deal with. And I thought, if I lost the team too, if she left me, I don't deserve all this.
Who am I? Yeah.
Yeah. What do I have left? So, okay, we'll go there.
And there was
a small local brokerage that was actually taking off. It's similar in mindset. It had to be, or I couldn't live there. So it's similar, but it was a smaller ship. It's local. And I missed it. I became a big fish in a small pond and I hated it. I didn't have people to look up to challenge me, to push me, all the reasons I felt uncomfortable. Growing, I guess. I hadn't grown into my shoes at KW, but I was doing it. Then all of a sudden they handed me these socks and sweats and, I could just coast, and there was I have nothing bad to say about the brokerage. It was not for me. And I missed KW. I was gone about 2 years. During that time, we finished the marriage. The team member left anyway. So leaving didn't keep her. And I disbanded the entire thing and came back to Keller with my tail between my legs. Please take me back home. And I'm just starting to rebuild the team now. So I've been back.
That wasn't that long ago that you came back.
No, I started the talks to come back last January, and I actually did the paperwork over the summer. So it took me about 6 months. I didn't want to. I disbanded the team. I moved my office to my house. I just focused on profitability. I got rid of all my overhead, and I knew that wherever I went, the biggest lesson I took was wherever I went, I was going with me. So I didn't want to make another mistake, and I really wanted to be sure. And I knew KW is where I wanted to go. I went down to Austin for the first step to be a MAPS coach. I started exploring all these they offered me a team leadership position, and I can't survive going to the office every day. But, I was exploring everything. So that was about a 6 to 8 month process. And the mere fact that I have so many opportunities in KW is part of the big reason I wanted to come back.
Yeah.
So I'm just starting to rebuild the team. I got 2 team members onboarded in the last 2 weeks that I've sort of been watching and grooming, and one came from another brokerage, one is brand new. I had my admin in place, Vonda, she's a saint. She joined me 3 weeks before I wound up in the hospital.
Wow.
So she had just about 2 weeks of me not sick, and then a week of me trying to work while I was sick. Then I dropped off, then our office closed, and she's been working from home. So
trial by fire.
Yep, I put her in the KW, who is it? Why can't I think of her name right now? The assistant coaching.
There's 3 different programs. Monica Reynolds, Brindley Tucker.
Yes, the old one, Monica Reynolds, the one that was around my first time around. So that's what my assistant, the last round, went through. So she's in that. We're finally, it's only been a week that we have regular calls, and I'm present all day long, and I don't need to nap. And
well, so let's go there, because I did follow, and it was scary for me watching what you were posting as you were in the hospital. So if you were okay, recapping that whole wonderful experience.
That was literally all my communication. There were so many people texting me and calling me. So what you saw is what everybody saw, with the exception of like my children. Like they got a little extra energy, and that was all I had. So
and how old are your kids, Gina?
My oldest just turned 25 last week. My middle is 21, and my baby is 9. All boys. I'm on round 2 of parenting.
Yeah, I guess so. So how'd you find yourself in the hospital?
So I had a cold, and one of my big lessons coming through here, I had a cold right when the virus was starting to make the news, and everything was just starting to come out. So I felt for the first time in my life, not that I should stay home, because that never crossed, like we go to work when we're sick, we do everything, it makes us stronger, we're survivors. That's never happening again. Can I curse on here? Because that was
yes, you can. It's a safe space.
So that is bullshit. I'm gonna just say that is effing bullshit. No, you have to fill your cup. You have to take care of yourself. So I was pushing, and I was trying. But the one thing I did do is I called my appointments, and I said, "Hey, I have a cold. Do you still want me to come?" Everybody said yes. Do you know if anyone ever asks me now if I'm going to say, no, you stay home, you go to bed. Can I send you soup? You want some pho? Because no, we should always take care of ourselves. So I did that for about a week. My oldest son lives down in Nashville, and he was calling me. Well, I talked to him a lot anyway, but he was starting to call me multiple times a day because I was getting worse.
Like, what do you mean worse? Because we think of a cold and, yeah, it's
So
uncomfortable.
I woke up one day and I couldn't talk. I lost my voice. That was actually my first. I had a bad sore throat and I had no voice. So I had laryngitis. From there, it proceeded. The cough is just what never, the cough just, there's nothing. I know a few other people who have been positive, and I'm not confirmed positive. I need to say that. I'm presumptive positive. It was too early. There were no tests. It took 12 days to come back. Nobody ever confirmed it. I'm not confirmed. So I'm not counted in any of your numbers, but I was released presumptive positive. I was negative for everything else. So I started with the cough. I had no voice that morning. Then I had a cough and normal body aches, low grade fever. I never got a super high fever, but very fever-ish. So, I'd get really hot and sweaty, or I'd get really cold, but my fever never spiked to the point where, I needed to take, I'm not a big medicine person. So where I would take a Motrin like 102, where you think you're 103 and you're dying. I was always hovering around 100, but I couldn't control it. It was like doing its own thing. But this cough was just nothing. It was completely unproductive. Nothing comes out of it. And you literally can't talk. Like I couldn't say more than a word or two without starting to cough. And it kept getting worse. Like that, it was slow to, first you're coughing every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, whatever. And then it got to the point where I couldn't finish a sentence. And the world still wanted me to perform, and I still wanted me to perform. I was on appointments, not the day I went to the hospital, but the day before, and I just couldn't talk. And they're like, that's okay. You don't have to talk, like just, like, okay, pointing, what am I? So that day, my son calls, and it had gotten to the point where I just couldn't, your chest just feels, you can't take a deep breath. Like you just can't inhale. And there's no air. I can't describe it. It's too hard. It's just too hard to breathe. And I was coughing so bad, and he's like, go to the hospital. And I had new insurance, and I didn't know if I could because I had Kaiser instead of regular. This is all, for whatever reason, this is what I was all caught up in. I know. I didn't want to go to the ER and, be faced with my bills so far that I've received. I mean, I only have to pay $530, but we're up in like $50,000, and I don't have them all.
Wow.
Sorry, we're on my phone now, so sometimes it rings.
That's okay. So your son said, go to the hospital.
And I'm like, and I was fighting with him. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to go if I didn't have to. Everything's in the news. I'm overblowing it. I just need to rest. All this stuff is going through my head. Finally, I try to call the Kaiser number, to ask them, do I go to your unit or do I go to the hospital? Like, where do I go? And I couldn't. When I say everything is hard, when you don't get enough oxygen in your body, certain things happen. Your brain doesn't work. And things were just hard. Like I couldn't get my number. I knew where. Are you back?
Busy realtor.
I know. Sorry. That's why I tried the computer, but that didn't work. I couldn't get the number. I couldn't give it to her. I couldn't even program in my birthday. My lips were numb. My fingers were numb. My toes were numb.
At this point, did you realize you needed some medical attention?
No. I mean, yes, but no. I still didn't want to go. I guess the answer
Side
is
effect of being a strong, independent woman, right?
I did not want to overreact. So I underreacted, but I did not want to overreact. I ended up I'm also laying on the floor. Like you can't walk. You can't, lack of oxygen does a lot of really weird things to your body, in your brain. You can't think, you can't feel. Like I couldn't, everything was starting to go numb. It felt like I was in Jello. Like everything was slow, and I couldn't, everything was too much effort. I'm laying on the floor having these phone calls with the phone on speaker, and I just can't. Finally, I get really mad at her and I hang up rudely, and I'm like, I'm taking myself to the ER. And I did.
I'm laying on the ground, but I'm going to drive.
Yeah. This is where I start to lose my memory. Of like, I have moments. I remember the phone call. I do remember the phone call. I don't remember getting in the car. I remember it's about a 4-mile drive to the hospital from my house. I remember looking down at the steering wheel. I didn't have my glasses on. I'm blind, like at a distance. I didn't have my seatbelt on. I looked down at the speedometer. I was going about 20 on a 45-mile-per-hour road. And I wanted to just stop. I was so tired. Like, that's the one memory I have of the ride. I was just like, this is too hard. I just wanted to go to sleep. I think everything was starting to really shut down.
Yeah.
And I'm coughing hysterically through this whole thing. Like, this is not a calm scene. I get to the hospital and I remember getting there thinking I'm overreacting again. And when I pull into the ER, I try to walk. Now remember, everything's hard. There's not enough oxygen. I can't stop coughing. I collapsed in front of the ER doors. And they put me in a wheelchair. My son was on speaker the whole ride. I don't remember how that happened, but I had my phone. I handed my phone to I couldn't do anything. Like, he's like, what's your name? No words can come out. All I can do is cough or hold my breath to not cough. Like, if you tried to get air, you'd start coughing. If you tried to talk, and it was too hard. Everything was hard. Is this too much detail?
No, no. I'm curious though, was this about a week in, do you think?
It was a Wednesday or Thursday. It was like day 7 or day 8.
And I should have asked your permission to ask you this question, but how old are you?
47.
Okay.
And I had just run 25 miles 2 weeks before. I was training for 50K. I was healthy. I was. Yeah. I don't feel super healthy now, but I was coming into this at my strongest. My stamina, I was doing 10 miles a day. I had just done the marathon length like a week before I got sick, because my 50K was the end of March. So I had to do it, take my week off on the long run, and then run so this was my peak performance.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't healthy that day. And I'm grateful. Like, had I gone into this,
oh my goodness,
or with normal habits.
So did they admit you right away? And was it early enough in the COVID pandemic that they immediately thought, oh, this could be coronavirus?
Yes, and yes. They wouldn't let me when they put me in the wheelchair. And if they told me anything, I don't know. So you couldn't have visitors in the hospital. So I think the hardest part was there was no liaison for me. My brain wasn't working, and they're not going to
translate or advocate for you.
Yeah, no advocate. There was nobody there to help me. Like, they helped me and took care of me, but to explain things to me or to spend time with me. They wheeled me around the back. I didn't even go in. I went in some back door. Here's moment of panic 1. I remember this. I didn't really know what was going on. It was so hard walking from the car to the door and that whole experience and giving them, trying to get help. That was so hard. I kind of had another come to moment, and I was going in an outside door, and I realized I had been outside. Like, I never went in the ER. I'm in a wheelchair, and they put me in this room that was not a treatment room. It was kind of like a closet. Like, it was just an empty, small, maybe 8x8 room. There was nothing really in it. I didn't look around. But when I opened my eyes, I saw blank walls. I was in a small space. I was by myself. The door was closed. And I just had this moment, like, what if I didn't get to say goodbye to my babies? Like, what if I don't get to see them again? Like, what if I don't get to, like, all of a sudden I just felt like everything was out of my control. It was almost like ice went through me. Like, I may never see anybody. Like, this is it. And it only lasted about a minute, but had I stayed there, I don't know if I could have even gotten better. Like, because that on top of everything else. From there, I described my time in the ICU and ER like this. They just kept taking blood and putting monitors on me. And I wish I could tell you a little bit more about what happened, but I had lots of x-rays. I had a lot of blood work. I wore a heart monitor. My heart was completely out of control. I didn't find out until I left. I was septic when I got there. So that's why they were doing all the CBC. Yeah, they had me on Levaquin, and I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't know a lot of what I know in hindsight, because I was just too sick. I didn't know I was in the ICU till I was leaving. They're like, we're moving your room. And okay, where are we going? Because now I can talk. It's like day 3, day 4, you know? And they're like, oh, to a lower care room. And I'm like, oh, huh, I was in the ICU had I paid attention. I was, from the COVID standpoint, nobody would come near me unless they looked like an astronaut. I was in the negative pressure room, you know, so my double doors to get in. I didn't share. I know somebody, I could always hear them talking in the hall. That was my only like interaction. I could hear them start to get dressed to come in. But I know we had our own HVAC. It wasn't connected, so I had my own everything. I had an alarm. I couldn't get out of my bed. I had the heart monitor. Like, I was completely, the IVs. I blow veins. Apparently, I didn't know that either. I had taken chemo a couple years ago for the MS, not for cancer, but so my veins blow out easily. So I was constantly getting these big like softballs of what is it called, infiltrated or something. But those are the only times they would come in. They wouldn't. The first couple days, I maybe had 15 minutes of human interaction. Like, that's it.
So was there no treatment that they could identify to alleviate the symptoms or?
No, so they told me early on when I first came in, I do remember them telling me they were admitting me. I remember there were 2 different doctors, the infectious disease doctor and like the regular doctor. The regular doctor was convinced, he pretty much said straight up in the beginning, he's like, you know, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, this is it. We can't find anything else. And clearly you can't. I did have pneumonia in my right lung. Like, there's no other reason for this. And unfortunately, there's no treatment. Like, so.
You just have to write it out. Were you cognizant of that? I just am fighting this and on my own?
I was too sick the first couple of days to really care about it. I really just describe it like this. There was no television, there was no books, I didn't care. I could barely sleep. I could barely be awake. It was sort of this weird, I coughed a lot. My abs and back hurt. I had the oxygen thing on all the time. I was getting the clots. They did the blood clot shots. It was just, they came in to give me medicine every couple hours, the cough syrup, and I had the inhaler. I had this exercise thing I had to blow into to keep my lungs open. I hated that. That's the most awful. I didn't want to do it. And in my head, I'm like, this is eating your vegetables. You do this. But that hurt, like, and everything. I could tell I was getting better by about day 3 or 4. And it was slow to get better. So
but getting better, I mean, that, because again, I did follow and read everything that you wrote, getting better really meant you could stay conscious for a while.
Exactly. Yeah.
It wasn't like, so what was your total time in the hospital?
5 days, 4 days in ICU.
Okay.
And 1 day in a regular room.
And then the
regular room was on the COVID floor. They were all COVID patients. That was actually nice, because in ICU you hear code blue all the time. You hear all this noise, and I think it's because it was earlier on and they weren't doing electives, and our hospitals aren't at capacity here. So they had an entire floor for COVID, and it was quiet. It was actually kind of, I noticed the difference coming out of the chaos of the critically ill into the let's just watch area. And so it was nice. They took great care of me. They really did.
And then when they released you, though, it was presumptive COVID. So you were home quarantine then, obviously.
Well, so I'm going to tell, moving rooms, they had to clear the hallways. I wasn't allowed to breathe. Oh, and wearing a mask when you're coughing, they would get so mad at me. I couldn't do it. There's not enough air anyway. I remember that, like in the ER. I can't breathe. Don't put anything over my mouth. Like, there's not enough oxygen. When they moved a room, you have a police escort. Like, there was a security guard. They had to clear the hallways. They wheeled me through. I was in the same bed from the ER until I got released. They just wheeled me around. So when they wheeled me into the COVID floor, that's where I don't really remember the first one, but the COVID floor, they're shutting down the elevator. So when they go to release me, they do the same thing, right? So they wheel me all the way down. There's only one door I'm allowed to go out of. I have to clear the hallways. I hear the announcement, like it's this whole big deal. I drove myself. My car's over at the ER. That is not the door that they release you out of. Nobody else is allowed in the hospital. And it took them, they tried to see if they could get permission to wheel me outside to my car. I could barely walk to the bathroom. So getting better is definitely subjective. Like, I'm better now, and I still cough 10 times a day. Like, someone will hear me cough and they'll be like, oh God, you're still sick. I'm like, no, it'll take a little while, but yes, I can't run, but I'm much better, mostly in the mornings. But they wheel me out and I have to walk around the building.
Seriously?
Yes. They weren't allowed to push me for liability reasons and insurance and all of that.
Oh, so let's let this woman who can't breathe, fall in the parking lot because she passes out. I mean,
I didn't even know if my car, I have an electric car. I didn't even know if it would start. It's been sitting there for 5 days. Okay. And I just remember thinking, well, what are you going to do about it? Like, you have choices here. You can stand outside, because I had to get out of the hospital. That was the one thing. I was not allowed. I was allowed down these hallways, and the whole thing was I go out this door because I can't give it to anyone in the hospital. Like, they were very.
It's like the leper treatment.
Yes, very much. I had a scarlet C.
Yeah.
Like, get out. And I'm like, well, I could call an Uber, I guess, but then do I want to give it to the Uber guy? And, like, I'm going through all these scenarios in my head, and I'm like, you just walk to the car, girl. Like, just walk to the car. And I did. I drove home. And then my tribe, go back to KW, that office has been amazing. We do have several people in the area that got sick, not all, not necessarily all our market center, but, in our circle.
Sure.
And my office has rallied, like, and I'm the new kid on the block. Not only that, I kind of feel like I'm I hurt people's feelings when I left. And I
made a lot of people happy when you came home, though.
Yeah, well, there was still some hurt, and I recognize that, and all I can do is show up, and all I can do, I understand why I hurt them. I hope that one day they can, and I'm sorry about it, and I hope one day they can understand why I did what I did, and it wasn't personal, and it was a bad decision. And it had
we
to
all
be
make them.
I feel like you can't really have regrets. Like, it had to be made, like you kind of, as long as you're growing.
Always in that situation is, did you learn from it?
Yeah.
All right, great.
It's not about, like, babies try to learn how to walk. How many times do they fall down?
Yep.
If they quit, they never walk. Like,
can you see a time in the future where you're going to leave again?
Oh, no.
All right. Well, there you go.
Oh, no.
If there's some people out there that are giving you a hard time, send them to me. Take care of them.
Like, even if I left the industry, so there's a little part of me that's tired selling. So, and then rebuilding the team and all of that. I'm back on, took a buyer out for the first time in like 15 years. So there's a little bit of that. So I question what area of real estate I want to be in, but whatever it is, I'm affiliated with KW, without a doubt. There are so many opportunities and so many amazing people and so much growth and transparency. And yes, I'm not going anywhere ever.
Okay. So let's go back. You were in for 5 days. How long ago did you get out? So how long have you been home?
Oh, 5 weeks. 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I got out like April 1st or 2nd. It was early April. I went in March. I came out in April, I think.
You did. And I just want everybody to hear, and you're still coughing. So this is, from probably as bad as you could get and still get out of the hospital.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
To not 100% yet, but doing pretty good.
I feel I'm not where I was, but I feel 100%. Does that make sense? So I'm not.
You have contrast now. You can distinguish, when you're at a scale of 1 to 100 and you're at 5, 50 feels great.
Yeah. So I think going into this, I was at peak performance. Like, before I got sick, I was peak performance. So I'm nowhere near peak, but I don't feel, I'm on the other side of 50, definitely. Like, if you're doing the 0 to 100, I'm definitely on the top end where I can keep improving to get better. I don't have a lot of stamina. I can't say any anymore because I don't nap. I can make it through. The naps just disappeared in the last like 4 or 5 days. The last 4 or 5 days. This is only, and I had a different quarantine experience than everyone else. And, you know, I'm very cognizant of we all have different fears and different experiences. This might be my 8th Zoom call of 2 months. Like, put that in perspective.
Wow.
I did not, what you saw on social media is about it was that in my family, like, and sleeping. And, you know, I started playing cards with the kids, and I started cooking dinner maybe 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. I started cooking dinner 3 weeks ago. First couple weeks home, it was all left on my door. I was quarantined. Then it was
So,
still.
obviously your 9-year-old must be at home.
Yeah, so my 9-year-old was with his dad, and
Okay.
then had to stay there until my quarantine was up.
How was
Then,
that? And that's what just was so heart-wrenching to me. I'm not a parent, but the way you describe that disconnection with your kids, just, oh my goodness.
that is the longest that I have been away from one of my children ever. Like, until they're grown, you know, until they go off to college. But that is the longest, and it was, and I couldn't do anything. And then I was scared when I got him back,
You don't
because
want to get sick.
well, I didn't want to get him sick, and I didn't know if I could take care of him. Like, so I'm a single parent. Like, can I take care of him? Am I strong enough? And is he really the true parent? What's best for the kid? You know, like, at that point, is watching mom sleep and cough all day versus not seeing mom, and, you know, like, what part, the fractured bond versus the fear of watching me struggle, like,
Yeah.
which is, how do I go to the grocery store? That was like my first freak out. How do I get food? He's not allowed to go out. I'm not, it's only the 2 of us. I can't leave him home. Like, I had my round of quarantine freak out happened like a month after everybody else, because I didn't have to navigate it. I was grateful y'all paused and waited for me to get better.
What a great way to look at it.
I really was, because had the world, our market was so busy when I mean, so crazy busy. And we're still busy now, but at a lower pace. And we have a lot of people still sitting on the sidelines, you know, listings that aren't quite ready to let people in. We were never shut down. We were always considered essential in Virginia. But we did, you know, like, significant drop off in listings and buyer activity. It's starting to perk back up. I don't want to go back to that frantic. I don't.
Yeah.
And I think Keller, of all companies, while yes, your numbers are important, but my numbers as a big team looked really great. But had Gary done my P&L at the time, which I'm so glad he does now,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have been that great.
Well, and how was your quality of life? If you can compare it now with the contrast of being able to be slower, more intentional about what we're doing.
Being more intentional is exactly, I'm that way with everything. Like, being more intentional, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to set my alarm, I'm doing the miracle morning. My success always came from pushing, if that makes sense. Like, I can push harder, I can be stronger, I can drive to the ER with no oxygen. You know, I can do this, I can survive. And I knew there was a difference between surviving and thriving. And I found a lot of that in travel. The travel would sort of allow me to reset. I discovered I love to travel. I gave myself permission to do it once a month, and that sort of saved me. But what I was functioning at, because then you're going here, and yeah. And when you see all of these, you know, you hear the smart people talk, it is a balancing act. Like, it's not, you know, it is, but what are your true goals? Life by design. Is it the car? Is it the house? For me, it's playing basketball with my kid in the drive. That is now more important, because I don't want to say, there's a time when it's mommy's on a work call, and there's a time when the numbers are important. And maybe this is part of my midlife crisis or something, but I want to run a small and mighty team. I don't necessarily want to take over the universe. If that happens naturally under this framework, that would be great. If my model
I don't think it's a midlife crisis. I think we have this pause. You got to get clear on what's most important. You already had the experience of building the big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you did it by the model or right, whatever. you know what that feels like, and now you know what this feels like. So
I like this better.
yeah, and I think that's one of the gifts of this is we get really a choice. You can't choose what you don't know exists,
Mm-hmm.
right? So without the entire world slowing down, I don't think we could have gotten in tune.
Well, and what are your gifts? What lights you up? You know, so I have the 2 new agents now. We're doing a call every morning. And my calls used to be how many contacts, how many this, how many that, what are the problems, what are the fires, you know, who's in my one-on-ones were, you know, let's do your 411, why, you know, it felt very, I felt like the principal, you know, like now my calls are, we do role playing, we do scripts. I think scripts are the most important thing in the entire universe. The amount of things you will learn about yourself and other people participating in role play and scripts is tremendous. So we have the 3 of us on and we go back and forth, and all we're doing is care calls. And today we added care calls with a little bit of market at the end because we are talking about opening up. And, you know, do you have any questions? Has this pause caused you to rethink anything? You know, like, do you have your goals changed? Do you want to talk about it? Are you, you know, is there anything you need? Whereas before it was just, are you okay? When they were doing care calls. So if you do bold, the Ford script, that's how I ran my business. Like when I saw that, I'm like, oh, there's a script for this. Like that's my life. That's what I want. And I think where I sit and what I've done, and you know, people like you and other great leaders, both in KW and outside of KW, I look up to you, and to be able to have conversations and share and feedback, and that's what lights me up. And one thing I heard a long time ago, my first stint in KW, the amount of money you make is in direct proportion to the amount of people you help.
Yep.
And I'm not counting, you know, there's going to be no billboard on the side of the, you know, highway with my face on it, you know, call Team AGC. What you will have though is dinner might show up in your driveway, you know.
So cool.
That's what I care about.
All right. So as things are loosening up, right, and you have this different perspective because you contracted this, how are you going to be different out in public? Or will you? That was a big assumption. Will you travel differently? Will you go to the grocery store differently?
So I have yet to go to the grocery store. I have
How
had
are you
people
eating? Is the market center helping here? I mean,
so the market center has helped a lot. My neighbors, my circle, my tribe. I have yet to go to a grocery store. I know not of what you speak. I think about it sometimes. It's no, Dylan complains that there's not enough food, but we're not starving. So that's a 9-year-old complaining that there's no, like, you know, sugar cereal or something. Yeah. So I don't know what that looks like. I know I have been out and about. I've gone on a handful of appointments, and literally a handful. I've done a lot of Zoom, not Zoom, but phone calls, and I've just paused myself. When I do go out, I wear a mask. I don't wear gloves. I think you're spreading more. I have antibacterial stuff, and I just put that on the minute I get in my car, when I go to leave my car, you know, and I think that's better than a dirty glove that I then turn inside out and it gets on the inside of my car, or you see them dropped in the sidewalk, not that, but, or even if you throw it away, then somebody has to empty the trash, and why am I sharing all my stuff? I can just go like this.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, from other people, my biggest change is compassion. It's empathy. It's don't be afraid. I have a real, like, if you look at the numbers, most people will live. Most people don't end up in the ICU. It will be okay. It is real. I've seen little hints of that. And when someone's sick, that's the biggest, it's like the after is, if somebody's not feeling well, it's not, I really feel like we were all forced to perform. And maybe I just did that to me. It's my hallucination that other people felt that way too.
Yeah.
You drag your ass in.
So many times in the market center, we as a staff will say, if you're sick, stay home. But then what do? We show up because our jobs are so doggone important, right?
They're not. I mean, they are, but they're not. in the hierarchy, it's you come first. You know, your family comes first. What is it? God, family, business.
I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, it's not business, family, God. It's God, family, business. And you are a child of God. Take care of yourself. Like,
Yeah.
So what are
And
you, are you open?
we are not. We're going to have the phases, just like I was on the phone with some people from Chicago this morning. We're going to look, I think, a lot like Illinois. We are in our office relaxing a little bit of the restriction. I had an absolute do not go in. Now with agents
we still can't go in. We still can't go into our office until June 1st.
If we have agents who rent office space, if they need to go get something, or that has been relaxed a little bit. We're not fully opening anytime soon. Number one, it's not smart, I don't think. Number two, it's illegal. We still have to follow what the governor says. And number three, there's actually a list of things that you have to do if you're going to reopen your business, and we would have to sanitize daily.
Okay.
And that's just not, it's not something that we want to take on. I talked to somebody yesterday who started to reopen their office, and they took the coffee machines out and lock the refrigerator. Anything where hands would
communal stuff.
I'm like, wow, that's a lot to think about.
It really is. I don't know what school's going to do. They shut our schools down here, obviously, until the fall. And they're starting to talk about what that looks like. Or my son, my middle goes to UVA, and they're talking about what that looks like. So summer, they're still doing distance learning, but do they bring everyone back for the fall? Like, do they make it optional? Are they, the joke is then they're just at University of Phoenix, UVA campus. Like, if it's all online, it's not, is he getting the experience? And so I don't know what any of that looks like.
Yeah, I think we all will be well served to just kind of go with the flow. It's going to be very interesting, very interesting. What are your unemployment rates doing there? Being in DC, that area, I would think it's complicated.
Plead ignorance on that. I don't have cable. Another fun fact about Gina, I haven't had cable for 10 years, so I don't really watch the news. It has to bubble up on my feed, or I have to go looking for it. I haven't looked. I can tell you, like, I'm very active in my county, like in the chamber, and so small businesses I know really well, and I know the real estate industry really well, some of the builders and brokers and things like that. I can tell you that we have lost some small businesses that I don't think will come back. Yeah. We have lost some big businesses that I don't think will come back, like chains and bigger restaurants, and that I worry they were open in the beginning doing curbside and carry out, and now they're just closed. And I worry a little for retail space because, we have some malls that have been struggling to begin with. I worry a little bit about that. I do know when I say we'll all be okay in the end, I truly believe that. Like, I have a sense of calmness. So even when I talk gloom and doom, I worry about real estate. The red flags I see in the future there are the investors, the Airbnb, the vacation owners. They're all small businesses. Yeah. I had a beach house for 10 years. I have a couple investment properties. If my tenants stop paying and I can't evict and I can't get a new tenant in there, it's those things that I worry about. I worry about the people who took forbearance. They can't refi, or they can't buy another house. And will they be able to make that pay if they have a jumbo payment? Did they understand it's all due? Will they end up in foreclosure? There's some red flags and there's some rough waters ahead. Personally, though, our inventory, our demand still outweighs supply significantly.
And even with those, I mean, many of us have been through different shifts, right? And we become so much more valuable when something like this happens, because there are going to be some people who are in a really dark spot, but realtors who really serve and aren't just in this to turn and burn are going to be necessary. Yeah. This is where we can fill that void now.
And provide even more value, like massive amounts of value. So it's not even just the real estate. Like, I know how to call your investor on your mortgage and see if we can work something out. It's not even the technical, it's that piece that, here are your options to, when a child falls down, if you just scream hysterical around them, like, oh my goodness, they got hurt, or the one that comes in and says, hey, let's calm down, that's what experience, that's what, when you're here for people and not for profit. I mean, profit, yes, we all want, I had an unprofitable business. It's not a good thing. You know, the profit, yes, but that's serving yourself. That's the God family business. That's profit is, if you're doing it right, you know, are you paying attention? Are you taking your vitamins? My whole point, we'll be able to serve people, not just, you know, we're going to help to hold their hand through the storm and to know that it will stop raining. Like, it will be okay. And I don't think it's anything like '08, and it's really the supply and demand that keeps me there. Our demand outpaces supply, and that's always good. Like, as far as health, you know, it means we're still moving along. There's some red flags though. There's some serious red flags.
For sure. For sure. No, I'm chuckling every once in a while because your dog and cat have been very active in the background. It's awesome. I think your dog was chasing the cat around a little bit.
Probably. They really run the house.
So with the 28 people we have here, any questions for Gina? Come on, ladies.
Where do you see them? I don't even know how this works. I'm a newbie.
On your phone, it's hard because everybody's small. And I said ladies because out of the 28, I think we only have 2 gentlemen on the phone.
Oh, I see faces.
Can you see them?
Let's see. Yes, I see Judy and Valerie and Dana and Debbie. Hi. And Nancy and Tisha and Evie. I feel like, what is it? Magic Mirror. Do you remember Magic Mirror when she would name all the people?
I don't.
Oh, it's a show growing up. So I can't remember the show, but she had a magic mirror. Romper Room. Yes, Valerie. Valerie remembers. What's my biggest lesson? I can see this. I fixed something. I can't see you anymore, though.
That's all right. You don't need to see me.
Okay, there you are. My biggest lesson is to slow down. It is really to fill my own cup. I came into this with a fairly strong health-wise, but I was pretty fragmented, my energy, trying to keep up with the market and all the demands and to be involved in all of these things. And I'm going to be going to a lot less networking events. I'm going to be going to a lot less things because I have to make an appearance. Yeah. I'm going to have a lot more grace and empathy for myself and for others. I mean, that's my biggest, is just, I almost feel zen about the whole thing. It's pretty, I'm very zen about it. I have felt pretty solid through the whole thing. I freaked out when I first got home trying to figure out how to take care of Dylan, and I freaked out in the hospital when I thought I'd never see them again. And those small micro moments.
I'd be very concerned about you if you didn't freak out about that.
That was complete loss. Like, I went to the dark side. Like, I'm not, like, you know, and I still have the thoughts, like, they go through my head, but you don't have to stay there. Like, they do what you can when you can and be present. So my biggest, it's all very zen. My biggest lesson is very zen.
Do you think, had you taken your physical health more seriously in that first week, you would have gotten as bad as you did?
Yeah, I don't know if I did slow down. While I still worked and everything the first week I was sick, I didn't go to any functions. Like, I turned down multiple. I usually have an event, so I had one, if not 2 events every night. Like, that's
your lead gen?
thing. Yeah, that's my thing. I'm everywhere. And I love it. I call peopling as a verb. Like, I like to people. So I'm going to be more purposeful in that. So I had already stopped the peopling part and was just doing the work the first week I got sick. I don't think there was anything I could have done. Okay. Like, as far as maybe if I stayed home the very first day, there was a little bit of guilt in the hospital of who I could have gotten sick because I did leave it up to them. So I've learned this lesson multiple times in my life. If I'm doing something wrong that I don't feel is right, or if I know better, even though somebody else says it's okay, or it's not my call, that I still have responsibility. And I felt it when I got sick. I felt it in other times in my life when you know someone's doing wrong and you kind of turn. I will never do that again. I learned a big lesson about that a few years ago, and I didn't think I did it anymore, but I did.
Yeah.
I did it with knew I should have stayed home. I should have said, no, I'm sorry, I can't reschedule. I can send someone else. I'm no good to anyone dead. And,
well, trust that
and,
voice, right? Trust that
well,
voice.
and the guilt of thinking I caused this on someone else. Like, I don't want to spread. I want to be uplifting, not, I don't want to hurt people. So.
Linda had another question here. Did they track, or do you have any idea how you may have contracted it?
No, there's several people in my circle, and it's a big circle. You kind of already figured that out. And none of us have any idea.
Do you have other friends that you know that got it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Close friends. It's not a surprise.
Yeah. Yeah.
All about the same time. So you couldn't even say they got sick 2 weeks after me, or I got sick 2 weeks. We're all about the same time.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, I think she was about to have an epiphany. Okay, Gina.